more South Africans are turning to drugs, and those lighting up or spiking up are getting younger and younger. With demand growing, the drug business has become a game of cat and mouse between the authorities and the drug smugglers. Crack cocaine use is growing faster than any other drug in South Africa, with children as young as 10 smoking it. Smoking or injecting heroin has increased by 400% over the past 8 years. But there's also an array of other drugs available on South Africa's streets.
The biggest drug consumed in South Africa is mandrax, and that used to be sourced primarily from the Asian subcontinent. It's now sourced primarily from China. Chinese producers have eclipsed Indian and Pakistani producers, mainly because they're managing to produce enormous quantities very cheaply and ship them. There's also a lot of evidence that mandrax, or the precursors for mandrax from China, is being bartered for abalone. So there's an enormous market for South African abalone in Hong Kong and mainland China.
There is another drug that could become more popular than mandrax. It's called crystal methamphetamine, better known as TIC, and it's taken South Africa's youth by storm. Hundreds of organised drug syndicates operate in South Africa. Experts say Nigerians run most of them. But there are also Indian, Pakistani and Chinese syndicates. Police claim last year alone they closed down 396 syndicates involved in the drug trade.
Organised structures and international syndicates mostly. And in terms of saying whether they're South Africans or foreigners, it's mostly foreigners that we arrest.
Cindy Rodriguez was 20 years old when she was recruited by Nigerian drug lords in Hillbrow, Joburg. Syndicates use mules to smuggle drugs in and out of the country, one of many methods. Cindy was a drug addict herself, and the lure of a quick buck was as tempting as a quick fix.
They're very kind of cunning and deceiving, and they make it sound and look a lot easier than what it actually is. They're very nice to you, and they're full of promises, and they help you out. And of course, you know, like I said, they took me shopping, you know, go buy clothes and everything so that you can play the part. And they fooled me.
The mule is at the bottom of the food chain in the drug smuggling world, and they're usually abandoned by their recruiters if they are caught. Cindy was arrested in Venezuela and got a 9-year jail term when authorities found 10 kilos of cocaine in her suitcase.
It was double wrapped on the sides of the suitcase. So, you know, there was material over. They stripped the material and they found, you know, duct tape with, and there was probably about 4 or 5 kilos just in that. And then in baby powder, 2 containers of baby powder, there were 2 bags. And then in chocolates, like trays of chocolates, each individually wrapped. There's a layer of chocolates, and then there was a layer of duct tape. And underneath the duct tape was cocaine.
Just like Cindy, Eugene Boyen's life went up in smoke when drug lords recruited him. He says he became a drug mule because he needed money for medical treatment for his daughter.
I think it's difficult to explain. I was picked up. I was put in a motel close to the airport. The next morning, this guy arrived, this Nigerian, and the exact same case that I had was then swapped with another case. And I was late for the flight because this is their trick. When you fly and carry for them, they make sure that you are so late that you can never check what is in this bag.
Eugene was arrested when he arrived at the Osaka airport in Japan.
And then suddenly they just blocked everybody off that came off this flight, and they checked every bag. and they have a little piece of paper in plastic like this that shows you marijuana and shows you this and shows you that, and they say to you, do you have, and they've got an interpreter there, do you have any of these substances with you? And of course I said no. And I got no. And that was it. And that was the last I heard from my Nigerian friends. They are gone. When you get caught, you're a lost cause, you failed, they don't know you.
At least 57 South African drug mules are currently jailed in prisons like this one in Peru, in South America. Locals are serving lengthy prison sentences all over the world, including Australia, Europe and the Far East.
We found the larger numbers in South America, and it's on the increase. It's on a steady increase. We were told officially that Foreign Affairs has 893 prisoners on their records, and those are the numbers that they are aware of, that they've been informed of by their embassies. However, I can guarantee you it's over 2,000 prisoners at the moment, because we have at least 30 prisoners being incarcerated every single month across the world.
Apart from suitcases, drug syndicates use many other cunning methods to smuggle drugs past South Africa's authorities. This is perhaps the most ingenious smuggling method ever invented by drug syndicates. They get mules to actually carry the drugs in their stomachs in the form of bullets. To make the bullets, drug traffickers fill condoms or the tips of latex gloves with drugs and then tie them securely with dental floss. The mules are trained to swallow large quantities of bullets, but it's a potentially fatal drug-carrying method.
Pose de pronto para que no vengan a tirar baño para no botar las pepas. El aeromotil lo amarra automáticamente.
If it had been possible to seal up a border, there wouldn't be an international drug trade, and there's an enormous international drug trade. And one of the reasons is that you can't seal up a border. They all are more or less porous. You're doing very, very well if maybe 3-4% of goods passing through a harbour or going through an airport are actually checked.
The 3% examination rate of goods being imported may not sound like a lot, but if you take into account the quantity and volume of cargo that comes through our ports, it is a substantial amount based on the resources that we currently have. In 2004, at the major ports of entry alone, we have had 1.2 million entries that were passed on imports only, and another 800,000 on exports as well, which also have to be covered.
If authorities opened every piece of freight moving through our harbours, they would come to a standstill. And so would the economy.
The key to success is to make sure that you check the right 3 or 4%, usually more like 1 or 2%. And that's the cat's job. The mouse's job is to ensure that your contraband is not in that 3 or 4%. And the odds are always in favour of the mouse. If the mouse is smart, it's always not foolproof, but always possible to get your contraband into that 97-98% that isn't going to be checked.
So in a game of cat and mouse, the odds seem to be stacked in favour of the mice, the drug syndicates. And they will use any means possible to ensure their contraband gets through.
These guys just pay their way out of it all. And they're all married to white birds. And they're here. And they're here to stay. Who's going to take them out? Who's going to do what to them? They've got the money to pay. They bribe themselves out of every corner.
You know, any environment where valuable goods are moving through is a corruption-sensitive environment. Corruption is obviously a problem at a border post, and any competent border control agency must have very serious internal monitoring measures in place.
We do not deny that corruption is a problem. SARS is taking a firm stance against corruption, and I believe within SARS we are winning the battle against corruption.
We do have measures at points of entry specifically to combat corruption.
After the break, the authorities fight back. Chinese drug smugglers were dealt a massive blow last year when anti-smuggling teams intercepted one of the country's largest methaqualone imports ever. The consignment, valued at 750 million rand, was seized at Durban Harbour. It's believed the shipment was en route to Mozambique to be further processed into Mandrax tablets for sale in South Africa.
We do a risk analysis and stop those containers which we think pose risk. We also send out our anti-smuggling teams to show up through visible policing, and we also do stoppages across the country.
Authorities can detain suspicious containers and then check the contents by hand. But an X-ray scanner machine at Durban Harbour provides a quicker and easier way to check containers for contraband, including drugs.
Durban Harbour could also be a hub for drug traffickers, just like any other harbour could be. We have had some successes in catching some of the consignments of drugs in this harbour. Our anti-smuggling team is working furiously to ensure that these do not pilfer through into our society and into our country.
Africa's biggest and busiest harbour, where trade has doubled in recent years, has struggled to keep up with the volumes. There's also been an increase in the number of people moving through our land border posts. This makes South Africa's points of entry very attractive to syndicates.
Don't think border control is ever particularly effective. You can get good and bad border control, but in any system in the world it's going to be possible to get past border control.
We do have syndicates that are trying to smuggle drugs through our land border posts. And this is evident when we look at the type of seizures that we're doing. Just at Lebaba border post recently, we're looking at close to 300,000 rands worth of drugs that was seized there.
For authorities, the key to success lies in a formula, a set of indicators that is used to determine the risk of a flight passenger or even sea cargo and air freight.
We keep on revising the technology and buying the latest type of technology to keep abreast of trends. We use standard police things such as our police dogs, well-trained dogs that snuff out drugs. Obviously we have uniformed police officers that are specifically trained in profiling of drug mules and so forth.
Sound risk profiling is essential to customs operations. To assist us, we're looking at obtaining advanced electronic information, both for cargo and passengers, which will give us sufficient time for us to do the necessary profiling, identify the passengers that we would like to examine.
Authorities must be doing something right in the cat and mouse game. They had several successes in addition to the Durban drug busts last year, like this one at Johannesburg International Airport. There they seized a large consignment of ecstasy tablets.
In 2004 we had a total of 126 seizures. That equates to approximately 2 seizures per week. The same trend has continued throughout this financial year. Johannesburg International Airport has accounted for 60% of seizures nationally. This year, currently, we have had 54 drug detections. Out of that, 4 of them have been drug mules.
Authorities around the world share information to identify potential drug mules. Eugene was identified in Japan.
You can't deny it because your name is on your bag. Your fingerprints are all over that bag, you carried it. So how do you deny it? You don't.
Over and above the technology and all the other measures that we put in place, drugs is a global problem. So obviously we liaise with other law enforcement agencies throughout the world. Our police officers are trained specifically in specialized training at our border points to combat drug smuggling.
In South Africa particularly, we have long porous borders. We have neighboring countries who have their own economic problems. We have a 45% unemployment rate, which makes South Africa a good place or a soft target for drug cartels.
Well, in the game of cat and mouse, it might seem that the drug smugglers have got the upper hand. But I'm confident enough to say that we're gaining the upper hand if we look at all the successes that we've had and that we've achieved.
In the game of cat and mouse between smugglers and law enforcement officials, the odds are definitely in favor of the smugglers due to the high volumes of cargo that pass through, the limited resources of the law enforcement agencies. However, those tables can be turned.
After the break, is there a solution? Drug syndicates are well organized and well resourced. But can South African authorities match up? And do they have sufficient resources at their disposal?
You know, if you speak to anybody on the ground, they'll say they'd like more. And obviously, everybody could always do with more resources.
We believe that we're doing everything within our means to curb drug smuggling into South Africa. But obviously we need to continually reassess the drug trends.
I don't think there ever will be enough resources to combat drug smuggling. Law enforcement authorities can hope to control it to a large extent, but not totally stamp it out.
Customs is now in the process of expanding its resources and will be acquiring more X-ray scanners, which will be placed at strategic points around the country.
In order to help us combat drug smuggling at Johannesburg International Airport, we will be introducing cargo scanners as well as detector dog units. These dogs are primarily trained to detect narcotics, either hidden in passengers' baggage or hidden in cargo.
Despite the state's war on drugs, abuse of illegal narcotics is on the increase. Drugs are still easily available on South Africa's streets. Experts say that if money is going to be invested in trying to restrict the drug trade, putting that money into border control may not necessarily be the best solution.
I mean, around the world, there's a great deal of evidence that shows that if you invest money in trying to decrease demand, particularly putting users in rehab programs, you're going to get a better return on your investment. You're going to shrink the market far better than putting in border control, primarily because border control is by its nature imperfect.
I think the problem of drugs, as with any other social problem, is here to stay. It's about curbing it and the prevention and treatment of it. And what we're finding here in Gauteng in particular, with we've had subsidy cuts from government, 25%. So it's quite a problem because the people who need the treatment, we cannot reach.
You need to start educating. You need to get into schools and, a lot needs to be done. It all comes down to a choice. You're going to make a choice eventually. Drugs is something that we're never going to be able to combat. It's always going to be around. The government just needs to get a lot stricter.
The government does need to prioritize in terms of drug and substance abuse, because if you look at it, people do need their fixes, and to get their fixes, they will commit crime. Stats show that more than 60% of the criminals who were under the influence of some kind of substance when they committed the crime.
Ruins your life completely. Drugs ruin your life completely. And it's better not to even try to know of the consequences beforehand. And it's better not even to try the first time, because you won't have control over it. Like with the heroin, I was addicted before I knew it, and in and out of rehab and on the streets, and then the big fall was prison.
In the 2.5 years that Cindy was in prison overseas, she recovered fully from her cocaine and heroin addiction. She also met a Venezuelan prison guard, the father of her daughter Ruthie.
I've become a much better person. I've changed completely. And, you know, this experience has bettered me. And I'm a much better person. I'm much wiser. I'm more mature. And, you know, I've got my daughter. And she helps me to kind of keep myself above things, which is good. I'm going to put this one in yours. I plan to have, you know, a very open relationship with my daughter, and eventually she's going to probably ask questions of where, you know, her father and I met and everything, and I'll be open and honest with her so that she can learn from my mistakes. Blow kisses to Candace, blow kisses to Candace.